Welcome to the Excel Pod.
Everybody, welcome to the Thinking Kingdom podcast. I know you have been tired of listening to me for these last 3 episodes, exposed with Nate and I, Jeremiah 31 through 34, in the Hebrew writer's use of that Old Testament text, and hopefully you've enjoyed it, learned a little bit. But fear not, we have much more,
bigger brains,
and Al, our elder, he said, I listened to you and your friend Cody. He's got the stocking cap. And I said, I don't know who Cody is. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember the stocking cap. And he looked at me like I was crazy. And I was like, we didn't interview a Cody. He had the stocking cap on. You were doing Hebrews. I said, oh, Corey. And then I saw you. I could see your stocking cap. I'm like, yeah, Corey, yeah. He goes, yeah, Corey. And I said, yeah, we're recording with him here next week. So, but he liked the way you talk. So if people were tired of listening to me, they'll at least, if not for the content, listen to a good old Southern boy talk through scripture, which I think is.
I had an older pair of headphones, and it would rub on my head wrong, so I kept wearing a toboggan every time I would record anything, just for the cushioning up there. But Melody got me a new set, and so anyway.
There you go. Well,
we did. It was funny when I was a student at Bear Valley. Daniel, I'm totally hijacking what you're talking about.
You're good. That's how these go.
Daniel Mayfield was a student. He's preaching now down in Texas, but he was also a student when I was there. And the first time I preached in chapel, he came up to me and he had this wide-eyed expression on his face, and he said, "Dude, I don't know why, but it sounds more biblical with a Southern accent." And I'm like, well, that's the first time that I've ever been accused of something being positive about having a Southern accent. Usually they just deduct, 100 IQ points. Yeah. So anyway,
I think there's just something that, you're dealing with a good person with that, the good old boy accent is usually what I say. So they associate that with the good things of Scripture, maybe. But so today we're going to be looking at Hebrews chapter 10, how he's using that Habakkuk. Is it 2:4 or 4:2?
Mm-hmm.
2:4. 2:4 passage, and we'll talk about it a little bit and just see where conversation goes. We recorded this with Corey a long time ago, but I got a little too trigger happy, and between editing and whatnot, because there's only so much space on my MacBook, and so I gotta jettison all the content I'm not using to edit other episodes, and I didn't know that I had totally got rid of yours, and I wasn't ready yet. So all the good content you're just going to have to rehearse again. And I'm sorry to Matthew, because that was it's a cool thing.
I wasn't here.
Yeah, Nate wasn't there.
I'm not mad.
Yeah, so Nate gets to be a part of this conversation. So which I just feel sorry for Matthew because he put in the time, but we'll have Matthew on again, and so. Anyways.
Yeah, I am glad to be able to talk with Nate a little bit today, so that's good.
That is good.
Yeah.
Okay, let's verseful it up. Corey, we'll kick it to you as is tradition. We'll kick it to the guest, and then we'll, if you need help for whatever reason, I don't think you will. Nate and I will, if we can, help out. Here's the reference: everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved.
I don't know. I don't know if it's the original or the quotation. We'll start with Romans. What is it? Romans 10. I don't know. Romans 10:18. I guess.
Let's hit up Romans 10:18. Good. It was Romans 10. And it's got you're in the tens. So I was thinking, you were thinking obviously the Joel passage, and then I was thinking the Acts passage. That's what I was thinking of another passage. But anyways,
look, let's say we'll kind of go down the other end and say like Romans 10:13. It's right in there somewhere.
Let's try that out.
I guess about verse 18 is when he starts talking about have they not heard, and
yeah, there it is. It's Romans 10:13.
There's another one.
What's that name?
Besides Joel and Acts?
Yeah, it's Deuteronomy 28, because Deuteronomy 28 that's where Romans 10 is from. Is a quote not of Joel but of Deuteronomy 28.
Really? Or maybe that's how they have it cross-referenced?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess that makes sense if it's Deuteronomy, because earlier in chapter 10 of Romans, he talks about, listen, the thing that I'm asking you all to do is not that hard. You don't have to go up into the heavens and bring it down. And so I think that's from Deuteronomy
28.
Is that from 28?
It's all this. Yeah, it's all the same thing.
Okay. Well, I guess that makes sense. For some reason, I guess I thought that was Joel. But we know that Acts is Joel. Yeah, we know that one. Okay, cool. Well, I've learned something today. Yep. It was Romans 10:13, so good job, Corey. And, we just like to play a fun little game. It's been updated, so I don't know if anybody plays this. We have one viewer that's like, me and my wife are playing it now, and I'm like, that's great. Kind of getting some Bible and some people. So, okay. Well, without further ado, let's hit the book, the good book, and let's get off Versal. Let's throw up there Hebrews chapter 10. And so Nate and I had just finished, Corey, this exposition of Jeremiah 31. And as you know, and as the listeners have been bored to death, there's this new hope. There's this new covenant. The old has been done away. Everything in the old has foreshadowed the power of Christ, his sacrifice. And then at the end of chapter 10, what Nate and I didn't get to, because Jeremiah 31 ended, he's just giving these exhortations, basically to continue steadfastly in the faith, and don't neglect meeting with one another, because that's an opportunity that you can encourage one another in the faith. And then he kind of starts to traverse into, hey, just hold on to this faith, because it wasn't in vain that you've, subscribed to who Jesus is, because you've had your houses plundered. You've went through all of this suffering. And then he kind of starts to get into the meat of things in Hebrews chapter 10, verse 34. For you had compassion on those in prison, and you joyfully accepted the plundering of your property, since you knew that you yourselves had a better possession and abiding one. Therefore, do not throw away your confidence, which has a great reward. You have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive. Sorry, people, I don't have that up on the screen for you. You may receive what is promised. For yet a little while, and the coming one will come and will not delay, but my righteous one shall live by faith. And if he shrinks back, my soul has no pleasure in him. But we are not of those who shrink back and are destroyed, but of those who have faith and preserve their souls. So, Corey, I guess I'll just let you take things over from here, and kind of maybe give, if you want to give the bookends, or if you want to just do things how you want to do in introducing this Hebrew writer's use of Habakkuk.
Well, do you want to go to Habakkuk first and talk a little bit about Habakkuk?
I'm on board with you, so I'll go to Habakkuk.
Right. So this is Habakkuk 2:4 that he's quoting here. It's a little bit different in the quotation, but the basic idea is the same thing, and the main words that he's going to use. And really, this quotation, we talk about Hebrews being a sermon. This to me is kind of the thesis statement of the entire sermon, and really is the jumping point off for what's the most well known, I think, part of Hebrews, and that's chapter 11 for sure. But Habakkuk is an interesting Old Testament book, because Habakkuk is a conversation book. Like the entire book is just back and forth between Habakkuk and God, basically. And Habakkuk wanted to know how evil could go unpunished. And specifically the fact that God was going to use Babylon to punish his own people. And Habakkuk's argument is basically, all right, Lord, I know we've done some bad things, but we're not as bad as those guys. How could you punish us with those guys? And so the prophet's questions to God causes God to reveal some things to him, and the revelation contains this quote of that the righteous shall live by their faithfulness to God. And that idea is so important in the book of Hebrews that, really the idea of faithfulness to God, or faith, it's one of the key words throughout the book. Righteousness or righteous is a key word of the book. And that's throughout the entire book. He's been talking about that. But as you said, he goes from Jeremiah at the beginning of this chapter in Hebrews to the way he would use then Habakkuk 2. The Lord had told Habakkuk that if he was going to use the Chaldeans to punish Israel, but deliverance would come ultimately. And again, you've got righteous or just living in faith that he's wanting to emphasize to Habakkuk. You just remain faithful to me. That's the way you need to live. That's exactly what the Hebrews writer is trying to do as well. And so it makes a good point. I think we talked about in the previous one that episode that I was a guest on about the idea of faith in Hebrews. Probably faithful or faithfulness kind of is more the idea. And that's what he's been talking about in the context leading up to this, as you pointed out so well, is that, the need for holding on, the need for endurance. What is it that he says up here that verse 35, don't throw away your confidence. Verse 36, you have need of endurance. Well, that's just another way of saying that you need to be faithful. Don't shrink back. Don't regress. But when these challenges are hitting you and hitting your faith, that's not the time to turn away from God. That's the time to lean into God.
Yeah.
I think it's cool as I'm looking back up in the context, just I've highlighted those phrases you pointed out, therefore to not throw away your confidence. Verse 36, endurance. I've highlighted all of those faithfulness words, and I'm looking back up. And in verse 23, it says, let us hold fast to the confession without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. So our faithfulness is rooted in God's faithfulness. So it's kind of cool to see it. That's stated first, and then our part, I guess, kind of unfolds after that.
Yeah. And, Paul uses this same quotation in Romans about, shrinking back and that type of thing, but kind of in a different way. But in Hebrews, he's talking about faithfulness to Jesus. Don't turn your back on Jesus. In Romans, it's don't trust in yourself, trust in the saving power of Jesus. But in Hebrews, it's, don't turn your back on Jesus and don't walk away from him. And he's in the previous almost 10 full chapters giving you a lot of reasons why that you shouldn't. But, the idea is that the way that you're living, what you're doing because of your faith, your faithfulness is what's going to get you through those difficult times. And then again, we go into chapter 11, and what he does is he gives us all of these examples of all these guys that have done that very thing, that they've made that choice of whether to shrink back or to be faithful. And so what are you going to do now? When you've got these things going on, the persecution and whatnot that you're having to go through, the challenges to your faith, are you going to, be like Moses? Are you going to be like Noah? Are you going to be like Abel? Or are you going to make the choice to stay committed to him and be faithful to him, to keep living for him? Or are you going to turn the other way? Because eventually in chapter 11, he's going to tell us that, there's a promise that God has given us of a reward if we do remain faithful to him, but you've got to be faithful to him in order to get it.
Yeah, I just love, I mean, and you've already said it. I think one of the hardest conversations that I have when studying with people is over the word faith and what that means. And I know we've done a lesson on it with Dan, and he did a great job, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But how faith is the continuance. It's not a one time thing, and now you've got salvation, and now I don't have to, as Ephesians says, we can live a carefree, careless life. Well, the Ephesian writer would say, no, you need to walk circumspectly. You need to walk carefully. Be mindful with each and every step that you take. Make sure you're living your life right. And um, just I don't want to get into this topic of once saved, always saved, but if there's any book that's out there that kind of beats that to death, I mean, we do as Christians have, security of our salvation. We don't need to worry about if we fall off track every once in a while and then ask for forgiveness. That's what I'm talking about. But and there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ. We know this, but that doesn't mean that I can continue doing things that I want to do. You got to not shrink back. You got to hold on to Jesus and do all these things. So all these things that you and Nate have already pointed out, but I just think that's a point of conversation for people, that faith is just an umbrella term for me. It is.
Mm-hmm.
And underneath faith comes so many things. And you can go back to the Dan Owen episode for what that is. But I think it's just important to reiterate what you guys have already said and emphasize that point and how that matters in the context of Hebrews. So,
Yeah. And if Hebrews is read like a sermon, as it rightfully should be, this quote from Habakkuk really is the climax of the sermon. He's been building to this point from the beginning of chapter 1. And after this, he's going to start wrapping the sermon up. But to me, this is the crescendo, the main point that he's been trying to drive at through the book. The idea of being righteous and living by faith, by being faithful, has been used all the way through the book. And so, he's now, after building the case for why we shouldn't turn back on Jesus, now it's all right. Now here's the point of all this: be faithful. Don't think that you can turn your back on Jesus and walk away and receive the blessings that you want to have.
And so you're saying, just to clarify, you're saying, just like whenever we preach, we kind of put the facts forward, or maybe when Paul in his sermon or in his letters, like Ephesians, there's kind of a doctrinal section in 1 through 3, and then that whole deal. You could call up in Hebrews up until this Habakkuk quote, he's proving that Jesus is the rightful king. Chapter 1 is all about he's the on the throne. You have all this talk about the high priest and the king, and he's giving the facts of Jesus is worth hanging on to from a factual basis. And then in chapter 11 he goes, okay, here's the application part of this sermon. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, well, he's going to get to the application, I think, a little bit more in 12 and 13. But to me, at least, this part, like starting here especially, is more of the where he's really getting into the point that it's kind of like he's been laying out the evidence. Yeah. And then now we usually will have like a point of the sermon and then we'll prove it. But he's been making the argument or the case for Jesus. And then now he's turning around and saying, all right, now you need to live for Jesus. You need to remain faithful to him. Why? Because of all the things that we've talked about, because he's a faithful high priest. And as a servant, he was faithful to God. And, God who promised is faithful, and all of those kinds of things that he's talked about. Jesus is a better sacrifice, and he's a better messenger, and all of those things. So now what does that mean for us? Well, it means that you'd be crazy to turn away from Jesus based on everything that we've talked about so far. And now that you've got a little bit of a challenge to your faith, you've got some persecution and some things that are going on around you. Now is the last the last thing you want to do at this point is turn away, which is, again, going back to Habakkuk. Habakkuk I trust in God, I trust in God, I trust in God. And then God says, all right, the Chaldeans are going to come. Well, wait a minute, I don't trust in God.
Mhm.
Now you're going to give up on me, and that seems to be, we're bad about, for example, you know, Austin puts on there that he's been to the doctor and he's gotten this diagnosis, and we're going to have this surgery, and after the surgery everything went well and I'm okay and God is good. But we often don't put, our dear brother Austin passed away from his disease yesterday, but God is good. you know, we trust in God when things are going well too often, but what he's saying is when those times are difficult is the time to trust in God, to be faithful to Him, to make the hard decisions sometimes. And that, again, you go to chapter 11, the Hall of Fame of Faith. It's people that are making hard decisions in difficult times. It's not just that, Noah is a cool Bible story. It's that Noah was in a place and time in which the world was full of wickedness, and yet he went through all of the suffering that he went through to build this ark. But when he did, God was faithful, and he protected him and his family. Are you going to, when the times are tough, are you going to be faithful to him? Because there's nowhere else you can turn. And based on the evidence of everything that we've talked about, why would you want to even?
Yeah, I think that's awesome. That's so important. I think about this. I'm going to be doing a sermon, speaking at another church here next week, actually. And my title, or what I've been tasked with, is Trials in the Home, and how much we need to think about, even though we have trials, do we see them as blessings, and to show and prove our faith? And that's what this is. Whenever adversity comes and meets you and hits you in the face, what person are you going to be? Are you going to, verse 39, shrink back and go back to your way of, taking care of your issues on your own, going back to your other god, going back to the system that you're comfortable with? Or are you going to continue on with Jesus? I think contextually, obviously, they're wanting to go back to the system of Judaism that they're comfortable with, because that's where the adversity is coming from, is people that are chirping in their ears, but there's nothing for them there. There's definitely no forgiveness of sins, because Jesus affords that. And I think that last little part, and are destroyed, that harkens back to Hebrews 6, who have tasted the Holy Spirit, or been enlightened, and then talks about, and then have
tasted the heavenly gift.
Yeah, tasted the heavenly gift. Yeah, that language in Hebrews 6, and then where he's just concluded in Hebrews 10. What about us who are going to fall away? Well, there's an expectation of judgment from God. So he's dropped these things all throughout Hebrews 6, 10, and even now. Hold on to Jesus, or the outcome is you're going to be destroyed.
Verse 27, when you're talking about, if you turn away from Jesus, all you have to look forward to is a fearful expectation of judgment and a fury of fire that will consume the adversaries. Well, that's pretty bleak,
Yeah.
So why would you want to go down that path? When I was growing up, there were these books that I loved to read called Choose Your Own Adventure books. I don't know if they had them when y'all were younger, but I used to love to read the Choose Your Own Adventure books. And if you've never read one, it's like you're up in the mountains and the abominable snowman is chasing you and you're hiding, and you hear him coming around the bend. And what do? Well, if you decide to run for your life, turn to page 272. And if you decide to stand and fight, turn to page 123, and you can choose your own adventure. Well, we can, when I was reading them, sometimes I wasn't ready to go to bed. So I'd look at both pages and see what was the best outcome so that I could,
Yeah.
And this is what Hebrews is letting us do. He's saying, all right, choose your own adventure. Page 272 tells you that if you go this direction, then it's fearful judgment and fury of fire. Or you can go this judgment, and there's a promise of a better land, a better home, a better inheritance. Choose your own adventure. What do you want? When you know the outcome, it ought to be an easy choice for us. And I think so.
Yeah.
That's why, he following from there, he talks about in verse 32 the need to endure, and 35 not to throw away their confidence, and verse 36 to endure, and verse 39 to not shrink back. And over and over he's saying the same thing. You need to be faithful. You need to not turn away from the Lord, because my righteous one, the one that's going to be God approved, is the one who's going to continue to be faithful to him, because we've got a better high priest and a better sacrifice and a better tabernacle and a better covenant, a better rest, and all that. So choose your own adventure. Pick the one that is going to be a lot better for you.
Spiritually.
I'm thinking about.
Go ahead. No, I talk way too much on this podcast. You go ahead.
Well, I'm changing. I'm kind of going back in conversation a little bit I've been in Bible marking mode lately because we're recording. It's not out yet, but we're recording Bible marking class through Colossians. And we have like some students on here, and it'll be cool. But I'm in Bible marking mode, and seeing that Hebrews 2:4 is the, calling this the crux, kind of the turning point in his building, putting the next building block on his, argument. That you can only see that, like, if you read through the book and grasp the feel of the author. This is a total aside, just because I'm in Bible marking mode. It has nothing to do with the context or
it's important
message of Hebrews. Yeah, I just think I'm in that mode, and so it's how do you? Because I'm not studied in Hebrews like y'all are. I haven't gone back through it since my time at Bear Valley, and so I'm like, how do you? I don't see that, but thinking back through the things that we've looked at, it's like I totally see it. If I were to read the book and have it marked up, you can only see those things through appreciating the feel and the tracing the thoughts through the book or the sermon as it is. But anyway, that's just an aside. It's one of those places that it's like, man, Bible marking is cool. And appreciating those things is cool. It's just stuff is so much more weighty whenever you see it as it's supposed to be seen.
Well, that and it's cool when you're looking at it from the big picture of the whole book, and not
right.
You don't get that like if you just sit down and go, all right, in today's Bible class, we're going to look at verses 1 through 8 of chapter 1. But when you read the whole book and you study the whole book in its context, again, you go from there, from all of this, Jesus is better that you've been looking at for 10 chapters. Then you have this statement, then you have chapter 11. And if you go through chapter 11, one in my Bible, talking about Bible marking, I've got the righteous shall live by faith, or the just shall live by faith, depending on your translation. And you go through chapter 11 and highlight those words in chapter 11. And you see that clearly chapter 11 is pointing back to chapter 10 as an example of, the righteous shall live by faith. We'll prove that. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's start off with Abel,
Yeah.
And then, he just goes down the list and talks about each one. Each one of them has chosen to live faithfully to God. Because of that, God considers them righteous or just. And so the decisions they make of offering the better sacrifice or whatever is how they've lived to show their faithfulness.
It's cool too that I think this is a pattern that definitely it proves what you're saying about the significance of Habakkuk 2:4. The quote, the Hebrews author has been all over the Old Testament proving Jesus. This is the claim about Jesus. We're going to back it up with the Old Testament. Here's the claim about Jesus. We're going to back it up with the Old Testament. Now he says, here's my call to you. And we're going to back it up with the Old Testament, chapter 11, with all of these. So his mind is along the same lines, but now he's pointing the finger. Here's your role.
Yeah. And then you get to chapter 12, and he says, therefore, because of what we just got through talking about, since we have such a cloud of witnesses, we need to lay anything that's going to pull us away, and we need to run with endurance, which is kind of like saying, live faithfully,
Yeah, it definitely
and
is.
points us to Jesus and gives some practical application about some of those kind of things. So um, I really do. When y'all sent the list of me of texts to pick, it was easy for me because Psalm 8 is my favorite psalm. And so we talked about that one. And then Habakkuk 2 was my other one I wanted because I do think it's such a vital turning point in the
Yeah,
entire sermon of the book.
yeah, yeah. And you won't see that. I mean, I'm just beating the dead horse, but you won't see that unless you study the Bible the way that the Bible is supposed to be studied. You're right. If you say our Bible class today is 13, you're not going to see it.
Yeah.
But
And just a plug for Dan's commentary, his teaching commentary. If you're going through Hebrews, there's no there's no more, readable, approachable is the word I'm looking for, commentary than Dan's. It's very concise. It
Mhm.
has this big picture in mind. He's got the list that I gave the guys came from Dan Owen's commentary of what the Hebrew writer's trying to do. He's a big picture thinker. I'll try to link
yeah,
that if I remember into this podcast, but you got to get it. You got to
Yeah.
get that commentary for Hebrews, and he's got others on Romans and First and Second Corinthians that are just as great. So
And going back to something else that I know y'all have heard Dan say a bunch, when you're looking at key words, and we've already kind of touched on this with the synonyms for being faithful
hmm
in the end of chapter 10. When you go through chapter 11, he doesn't use the word lived all the time, but it's like the words that he uses are, it's not the same word, but it's synonyms. So, like when he says Abel offered, well, that offered is the way he lived. When it says
yeah,
Noah prepared, that's the way that Noah lived. And so, again, you start looking for that pattern that goes through there. And that's, again, he's just backing up what he said with Habakkuk. Everybody knows Hebrews 11, but they don't know Habakkuk 2:4, Hebrews 10:38 that really sets the scene for all of that. And what he's
mhm.
doing in Hebrews 11 is just recycling that phrase over and over with different people to use as illustrations for it.
I mean, I'm in complete agreement. I know, it's hard to argue with Dan, but it's just hard to argue with how the Bible uses its words to begin with.
Yes.
So, just really briefly in our Colossians class, I was kind of stressing Bible marking and key wording, but, you know, there's more than just knowledge that needs to be understood in Colossians. The knowledge about who Jesus is basically some of the same arguments in Hebrews,
Yeah.
but the synonyms of understanding and wisdom, and those all play into the same concept of reaching this state of enlightenment and recognizing who Jesus is. So therefore, you don't need to listen to these other voices.
That's
Um,
right.
that's that's an important point for Bible study out there, friends. Not that we have this access to knowledge that nobody else does, or that we're so much smarter. I promise you, I guarantee you, the three of us wouldn't come close to saying that. But whenever when you it's not just about the word itself. See how the writer's trying to expand and build on that word, like Corey just said, prepared, offered, in relation to the living out your faith. That's such an
Yeah.
important point.
Hmm.
What's the thought behind the words, the ideas behind the words? Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
don't know how you want to continue with connecting some things in the Hall of Fame of Faithfulness itself. If you want to continue that, or if you want to um, whatever direction you want to go. It looks like we have about we usually do these conversations until the end, Corey. So you just enlighten us with whatever you got. I'm sure there's some nuggets in here that we can go through.
Well, the chapter 11, of course, is a cool chapter, and again, especially when you look at it in the light of the Habakkuk quote, I think it really um, makes it stand out even more. What he's doing with this, how to navigate our life based on these examples that he's given us. And again, when we get to chapter 12 and 13, he's going to tell them that that's the application for us, is that it's imperative for us to take it, to endure and to not shrink back and those kinds of things. But a couple of things that's if you go through and look, like Verse 4 is by faith. Verse 5 is by faith. Verse 7 is by faith. And all these, again, we could go to faithfulness is probably, it's because of the faithfulness of Abel that he offered or whatever. Verse 7, verse 8, verse 9, verse 11, verse 17, verse 20, verse 21, 20, over and over again. It's this by faith, by faith. Well, that again comes right back to Hebrews 10:38 and chapter 2 and verse 4. Then you've got at the beginning of it in verses 1 and 2, he says faithfulness is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. And you go through and you look at all of these different accounts that he's talking about, how that even though Abel is dead, he still speaks. Well, that's the conviction of things not seen. Enoch would not see death. That's the conviction of things not seen. Noah was warned of God about things not yet seen. That's the conviction of things not seen. Abraham obeyed, not knowing where he was going. That's the convictions of things not seen. Over and over, you see that he was looking for a city. Abraham considered that God was able to raise up Isaac. He didn't know it, but he saw it. All of these different things that they're able to see ahead and say. So again, going back to this choose your own adventure, why should I not shrink back? There's something better waiting. You can't see it. We're running that race with certainty because of the fact of our trust that we have in God. And then that's the way that those men of old, he says, gained favor with God. And over throughout all of these examples, you can again point right back to that idea of, Moses refused. That's the way he lived. He refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. He wanted to live by faith, or being faithful to God. That's hard to do, but sometimes you have to. So it means refusing some things. It means choosing some things. It means considering some things. But again, it goes back to this same idea that our faith is going to determine our decisions. That's the transition, I think, maybe between faith and faithfulness, is that what we've put our trust in ought to change the way that we view the decision-making process, and ought to give us the framework for what it is that we're going to decide to do in our lives. And, again, I just think all of this that he's given us in these first 10 chapters has given us that framework to make this decision about why that we ought to make this decision to remain faithful to Jesus, no matter what, comes at us. And chapter 11 is a wonderful chapter, but especially, I think, in light of the fact of the context of the whole book, but also of what the Habakkuk quote. I feel like I'm rambling, but
no, you're fine. I think a really cool part of this is that the patriarchs operated their lives in complete faithfulness that they were going to receive this land that was promised to them, and they just didn't. They didn't receive that land. It was shown to Abraham and whatnot, but he saw the land because it was promised to him, but didn't see the fruition of it. I like verse 22. It's always cracked me up with Joseph. Joseph believed in this promise so much. He says, "You're going to take my bones with you because I know that this is going to happen." I think that is so funny. He says, "I'm not missing out on it, and I trust God so much. You're going to take my carcass with you, my dead body with you, because I know it's going to happen." And what's so important about verse 22, which was beautiful, is that as we're reading it, we read the story of they get the land just as promised, and guess who's there with them? Joseph is there with them, and we see that even in death and through death, he's faithful to God's promises. He says, "I know this is going to happen. Take me there. It will happen. And I'm sorry you got to carry me around, but this is the way it's got to be." And when they get it, we're reading the story like, holy cow, that dude's faith is insane.
Yeah.
And then even though we can't see the reward that's talked about in chapter 10, we can't see heaven, God wiping away our tears. We can't see the rest that's talked about in chapter 4, where we have this state of just complete communion and peace with God. We can't see that. And right now, you're going through so much suffering. It's hard to see it. It's hard to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that should be a point of encouragement to the listeners that no matter what you're going through, no matter how bad things are, and it could be bad to the nth degree, financial loss, your spouse left you, your spouse died, your child dies, you lose everything like Job did. Man, just hang in there because that's all you can do. That's all you can do is have your faith through it. What are you gonna go back to?
That's right.
Where Jesus is the only one that offers this peace and this hope. And we read the book of Hebrews, especially chapter 11. These guys did it. We can do it. They had crazier situations, people that have died by the sword, split apart, all these crazy things for their faith. And I just think that's so cool. I think that verse 22 just cracks me up with the bones thing. It just kills me every time I read that. But it's just, I mean, how powerful does your faith have to be that you're just like, hey, you're going to carry my bones because I know this is going to happen. You don't see it. I don't see it, but it's going to happen. I love that. That's just a funny little tidbit.
Yeah. I like verse 17. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nate.
No, I was just to that same point. When I'm talking about faith, when I'm preaching and stuff, and God's promises I preached on Psalm 73 yesterday, and in Psalm 73, Asaph is upset that the wicked are prospering, and he says, "My good works are in vain. This is pointless." And after he goes to the sanctuary of God in verse 17, he turns his perspective around, and he says, "Oh, I'm going to have to find it again." Somewhere in there, he uses the phrase, "Afterward, I will be received to glory." Not now, but afterward, I'll be received to glory. And it's just to that point that we are promised glorification, but it's not now. It's not in this life. It's verse 24. "You will guide me with your counsel, and afterward, you will receive me to glory." And all of these, our hope is not in this age. I think about the Israelites who were promised, how many generations were enslaved in Egypt that never saw the end of enslavement. They died enslaved for 400 years. How many 10 generations that never saw the end? And it's just so easy for us to, we're so nearsighted. It's natural for us, and the rest that we want, and the glory that we want, the edification that we want, the exaltation that we want, it's not in this life. We might die we might take our last breath in suffering. But we look forward to, as Psalm 73:24 says, "Afterward, you receive me to glory."
Yeah, that's a great point. I loved all that. That was awesome, Nate. It's huge.
Yeah, no, I like starting in 17 where it talks about Abraham offering Isaac, to the point that you made, Austin, about sometimes we have to go through some stuff. And sometimes when God tells us something, it's difficult. It's not easy, but it's a test. And so Abraham in Genesis 22, he says, we're going to go up the mountain and we're going to worship. And then when we come back, he had this faith that we were going to, well, in Genesis 22, it didn't tell us entirely what Abraham was thinking. But here he tells us in verse 19 that he considered that God is able to raise people from the dead. Well, where did he get that notion? Because if you read the first 21 chapters of Genesis, you know what you don't see? You see God doing a lot of things. You don't see him raising anybody from the dead.
Yeah.
So where did he come up with that? And maybe there was something that the Bible doesn't record for us that Abraham knew about. But it seems to me it's almost like that he has he's made up his mind that when I think about God, what is it that is impossible for God?
Yeah.
That's what he considered, that nothing is impossible for God. We're in our FPTC this year, the theme of it is limitless. And that's the idea, is that God is limitless. And sometimes we put limits on God, and that's what allows us to then reason ourselves away from faith. But if we consider God to be limitless, that he's even able to raise people from the dead, I've never seen it happen before, but I'm sure he can do it,
That's
then
awesome.
that's what's going to keep us faithful to him.
That's crazy.
The righteous shall live by faith.
I'm thinking about, I think Abraham must have been in chapter. Where was the promise about it was going to be through his own son. And he tried to. Where was it when he tried to sidestep God's plan? And was it Hagar?
Yes.
Thought God
And
needed
God
some
said,
help.
Yeah.
yeah. And he said, no, it's going to
Yeah.
be through your son. And so then I think that gave him
I
the
think
confidence to go up on the mountain and say, I don't know how, but Isaac's coming back with me. I don't know what God's going to do,
Mhm.
but this is what God said, and so he'll figure it out. Yeah,
yeah,
we
and I
could
think
use a lot more of that faith.
I think that's I'm looking right now, but I think that's 21:12, which is right before that. God said, Abraham, be not displeased because of the boy and because of your slave woman. Whatever Sarah says to you, as she tells you, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named.
Mhm.
So he says it's going to be Isaac, and then how many verses are left in this chapter?
Yeah.
20 verses later, he says, now go kill him.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how does Abraham know that he can raise him from the dead? I don't know. I don't know how it's going to happen. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know, by what. I just know that it's going to happen. That Isaac is going to be coming back down with me too, because even if I kill him, God is going to be able to raise him from the dead because he believed the promise. That's what he says, and
I just see how this could be so applicable to us today that, what does your Christian life afford you? You've got to take 3 to 4 hours out of your Sunday, given some lesson time and some driving. You got to give money, and you're still suffering. Nothing great has happened to you. You're surely not favored for whatever reason. Um, it's just, I just think it's so. I think Nate's already said it, and what the point of this, we can become so nearsighted, and if we listen to all those voices, that what's Christianity afford you anyway? We got to keep looking to that goal, that end, that reward, and no matter what comes our way, because
yeah.
what can we do? Well, I guess
I
we can
thought
shrink back, but go ahead, Nate.
I thought this isn't to toot my horn at all, but I thought a
Toot.
lot about. I'm tooting a lot of times in Huron. There's we've had opportunities to go, and I've thought about I will not leave until someone else comes. I mean, it's just not an option until someone else fills our shoes here. And part of me is like, well, what if no one ever comes? And I'm just like, Abraham didn't know, Noah didn't know. It's I don't know, but God will provide. And then to see that play out is just, man, when you get on your knees and you pray and you give it over to God, and it sounds so cliche, but it's just amazing to see how God. I think sometimes in our fellowship, in the circle of the churches of Christ, sometimes I'm afraid we think God has just quit working. He's taking a back seat, and we gotta. Again, sounds really cliche, but the God that we pray to is the God that that's the Hebrews 11 God. We say that all the time, but does our prayer life and does the way that we act reflect that we believe that we serve the same God who did all these things? And for me, it's a lot of times no. And I think we could do better at letting go and saying, I don't know how it's going to play out, but this is my conviction, and this is what we're going to do. It's crazy, but God can do it.
And when it's tough, when the rubber meets the road, is when that's challenged.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I think it's people don't see it. Whenever we're going through that really, really hard time, people think that they're not favored of God for whatever reason, or that they've sinned. But I think so much is, we have a lady. I have to tell it by a story, a brief story. We have a lady. We prayed about her at Bear Valley. She fell into a hot tub and the thermostat was broke, and it was like pretty much boiling. She didn't know it. Somehow she lost her footing and fell in as she was getting in, or I don't know if she was walking by. I don't know the full story, and I really don't want to ask her because you don't want her to relive that. So, but anyway, she found herself in it, and it was, I mean, she had 80% burns. We didn't know if she was going to live. She had infections. and nobody knew if she was going to live. I mean, it was touch and go for a long time, and we were praying for her and whatnot. But she was extremely like a pillar of faith for women everywhere. And I sat and I held my breath thinking, what is this going to do for her faith the whole entire time? Just see how somebody, and she is even more faithful to the nth degree. And that gives me hope that in the midst of our suffering, that she is still looking for that reward. And so suffering doesn't have to be all bad.
Yeah.
Suffering is a conduit through for us to, I don't know, to live out our life more fully, to embolden and strengthen other people. So a lot of us need to
Well,
be,
that's James 1.
yeah, we need to, yeah, that's
And
right.
Job.
Yeah, and Job. And I don't know how to bring this full circle, but we just need to think about what our faith and our outshowing of our faith in our deepest and darkest circumstances can do for other people. I mean, that's how Justin Martyr became a Christian, is he saw that other people were suffering till death, and they're like, what is so, these people are crazy. What is so special about this God that these people are like, yeah, you can kill me. And he's like, there's something to it. And then it's through that he became a Christian and became one of the most powerful apologists in the first and second century. In the second century, really.
Well, and we sometimes think it's hard to live with the Lord. But going back to your Psalm 73, you know, at the beginning of that psalm, he says, my faith almost slipped. Then after he goes to the house of the Lord, he said, I really say you put them on slippery places. You know, it's really harder to live without the Lord than it is with the Lord. And when you recognize that big picture, then it makes it really easy to live, for the righteous to live by faith, because we understand that there is that land that we're looking for that's better. There is that promise of something totally worth whatever we have to go through. The sufferings of this life is not going to even be able to compare with what we're going to get there.
Yep.
All good points. Anything else from chapter 11 that we want to touch on, Corey? I'm sure. Listen, guys, there's so much in chapter 11 for us to pick apart, but we just don't have the time to do it. Read through it, note the by faiths, and note the relationships about how they lived and how these people were, righteous. Not that they have obtained their own righteousness, but they're living out their righteousness, and then considered right in the eyes of God because of how they're living out their faith. So I don't know if there's anything. We've already touched on the kind of the bookends of chapter 12 and chapter 10 with the endurance. We've talked about being faithful and steadfast and what that looks like in the lives of these people. So, Corey, do you want to touch on anything else? I got no limit. So,
No, I think we've covered it. But like I said, I think this is such an important text for us to consider, just because of the fact that it's not only the application to us, the same one to Habakkuk. Where else are you going to turn? You need to be faithful to God, even if it's rough. The application to the Hebrews, where you're going to turn away from Jesus, even if it's tough. But it's important to study again to really understand the big picture of Hebrews. This is the point that he's been driving towards the entire sermon, and wanting us to understand that, it's not just a bunch of good facts about Jesus, but here's what it means for you, is that if you stay faithful to him, that's the only way to be considered righteous in the sight of God and have the reward of that.
yeah. And the powerful connection, because he's using all these Old Testament figures in their relationship to the true and living God, Yahweh.
Mm-hmm.
And then how he applies us in our walk to Jesus. And that can only mean one thing. He is God. So faithful living to Jesus is faithful living to Yahweh himself. So there's some Godhead connections there that I think people need to think on. So Corey, it's been great having you on this conversation. Always a pleasure. I'm sure we'll have you on again to talk about something else. We got a lot of people lined up. I'm excited for the future of this podcast. And these guest episodes always do better than just Nate and I talking. Well, course, I think Colossians hopefully will explode because I'm digging it. I'm loving the Colossians class.
Yeah.
Nate is leading us through that, and you all, it's a lot of fun. And we got 4 students, but they're I mean, they're equipped to teach in their own right. So, but we asked for volunteers and they came forward. So it's going to be a fun little format. Hopefully you'll invite us into your homes to mark up some text. It's going to be fun. Corey, you're awesome. We'll pray for your work. I know you all are looking for a campus minister and a youth minister. I saw that posted. I'm always surveying the land just to survey the land. You could talk
One
about
of the elders called me from there, Corey, and he said they're going to get rid of their third minister, do a total overhaul. Did you know that?
I would not blame them. I would not blame them.
No, hopefully you guys are doing okay in your areas there, even though you're lacking some help. But anyways, You're great, Corey. Appreciate you. Love you, brother. And
I love y'all. Appreciate y'all having me on.
No
Love
problem.
you. Thank
No
you.
problem. All right. Thanks for watching the podcast. Don't forget to go over to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Hit the notification buttons that anytime we have content come out, you'll be able to access it quickly. Don't forget, we're a part of the Excel Still More pod network.
Excel Pod.
What did I say? It's all together. I'm pushing all these terms together. Yeah. The Excel Pod, which is a part of this Excel Still More Inc. So if you go over there to their YouTube page, you can see Corey with the spotlight scripture that he does with his son Garrett, and so a short little 5-7 minute start to your morning. It's huge. They're going through First Peter right now. They also do Untied podcast. Great stuff. Coming up, things that we need to consider, some touchy subjects that we need to consider. So that's where you can find Corey. He is the minister at the Martin Church of Christ. Is that what it is? In Martin, Tennessee. So maybe I'll link their YouTube channel as well. I'll link everywhere you can find Corey. So anyways, you all have a great day. God bless. And we hope this lesson has been beneficial to you. See ya.